You're tuning into the Active Mom Podcast with physical therapist, Dr. Carrie Pagliano, a real mom's guide to all things postpartum return to workouts after baby. If you're a postpartum mom, coach, trainer, or physical therapist looking for answers on how to get back to running, CrossFit, yoga, Pilates, HIIT, you name it, without the fear of pelvic floor issues or doing something wrong, this is the podcast for you. Let's start the show. All right. Every once in a while, I get to invite friends on the show that I've known for a very, very long time. And I don't even know when we met, but I know our next guest, Ginger Garner, who's a PT from North Carolina. She is an OG pelvic floor PT. So thank you so much, Ginger. Mom of three, pelvic floor PT extraordinaire. Thank you for being so much. I can't even talk. I had to work today. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I feel like I'm going to word search because I just got off a month long and my first ever sabbatical.
Yes. Congratulations. You had your first RV trip with some good stories, bad stories. We were talking before we hopped on. My parents, I grew up traveling because they were teachers, and what an experience it can be, good and bad.
Oh, yeah. Well, I had never done the RV thing before. I grew up tent camping, never done the RV thing before, doing it with 3 kids and a 75-pound dog. And so it was my first time towing anything. I mean, really. So it was over the top. And I was going to commit to 3 full weeks and a bunch of national parks with a really kind of aggressive schedule. But yeah, not unlike me at all. So I told people that it would be epic before I left.
Well, and it was epic.
It was epic. I said it could be epic or epic. And it was both. So it was
awesome.
Good.
Love it. And so I think it takes a special kind of mom to take your 3 kids and hubby, and we did all that, but no dog. We left our dog at home. To take all of you and put you in like a small vehicle for several weeks at a time. And your kids are 17. The middle one is 15 and 12, all boys. So is your dog a boy or girl?
I had to get a girl.
Yeah. I was going to say we need more estrogen in that family.
I had to get the girl.
So clearly this is what like active looks like when your kids are a little bit older. We were talking a little bit earlier about just how much has changed in postpartum. Like if you think back to, your first pregnancy, your 17-year-old, and kind of what you had expected going into that, like, what did you expect? How did it play out? And then how did that evolve, up until your 12-year-old?
17 years ago seems like, when I look at my son, it seems like yesterday.
Yes.
I was just, holding him up so he could take his first steps. But when you think about it in terms of pelvic health, it's like 1 billion years ago.
It is. Oh my gosh.
It's like the Middle Ages.
Yes. Yes. I mean, you were a PT for how long before you started to go into pelvic health?
Well, I started out as an athletic trainer first. So hardcore sports medicine, manual therapy, all of that stuff. I can fix you with manual therapy. So that was 95. And then he was born in 2005.
Yeah. So, I mean, you were already kind of in it and doing the things, and then he comes along.
Yeah. And then it just blows me away because I actually ended up firing 2 practices before I found the practitioner that stayed with me through all 3 of my kids. Because they just simply weren't evidence-based. They weren't practicing evidence-based, gynecology, obstetrics and gynecology. They had some really antiquated practices that I knew would lead to, a good tear or other things like that. And so I finally found a midwife who supported perineums. She actually had a bumper sticker that said, "I support perineums."
That's a big deal, not for nothing.
It's a big deal.
That should go on a t-shirt.
I know. So they were called the 2 Marys, and they were well known for supporting perineums and helping moms and really empowering them. And that was it was 2 hours away to see her. Yeah. So I was already driving 2 hours one way just for my checkups, and you know how often that's going on,
Yes. Yeah.
especially in the 3rd trimester. So that was like a full-time job for me, but it was me really advocating for myself and my child because I wanted the best care
Right.
possible that was gonna really support my health, not just get the baby out and,
Right.
and you're fine, at least the baby's healthy kind of thing.
Yep.
Um, so as I went through it, my midwife and I became best friends after that because we just had this professional, banter back and forth
Yeah.
of, what are you currently doing? She's like, well, and she was really kind of on the cutting edge at that time. She's like, well, I do refer, but I don't know what they do. And I'm not sure how they
Right.
fix anything, but I do
Right.
send them along. But at that time, I self treated. I mean, I wasn't even around a colleague who could have treated me had
Right.
anything happen. And eventually, as the second and the third birth came along, stuff happened.
Yeah.
Chiefly, it takes longer, to put it
It
all back
does.
every single time. I tell, the people that I see now, expect 9 months for the first 9 months. For the second nine
Yes.
months, how about 18 months? And
Yep.
for my third, it was even longer because there was a little catastrophic injury that happened there.
Yeah.
That was preventable. Maybe we'll get to talk about that a little bit, but
Yeah.
it really blew me out of the water how much the lack of evidence-based care really to
Well,
get to the point of your question, it just wasn't there.
and I definitely feel like it's better now, but I think it's also pockets geographically and,
Mhm.
I mean, you and I are in kind of bigger kind of areas now, but like I don't know,
Yeah,
you can't just assume that because you have a provider in a big metropolitan area that you're gonna get good care
yeah.
that's supported by that. I mean, I had a client today and really not a great reason for vacuuming, and I'm like, "Hey, so now we gotta deal with that," and like,
Mhm.
"Really? We're still doing this stuff?"
I know, 20 years later, and, um, the typical thing that I'll hear, when someone comes through my door at the clinic is, "Well, I wasn't referred to you. I asked my OBGYN for a referral,
Right,
and they said, 'Well, you just had a baby. There's nothing wrong with you.'"
right, right.
Full stop.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I had another one today that, she was 4 weeks because 'cause I'm seeing them pretty early now, which I love,
Mhm.
and I thought that everybody pretty much was getting that check-in visit between 2 and 3 weeks, nothing, and she's all sorts of crazy symptomatic, and I'm like, "Okay, let's see what's going on here, like, why aren't we touching base sooner?" But I think the other thing too is just there was no guidance on where to start. I mean, like, you're a pretty active mom, like, how did you know like, if it weren't for your athletic training background, PT background, that kinda stuff, like, how would you have known where to even start with movement?
I wouldn't have because I would have just assumed that any OBGYN, that any practice was evidence-based and
Yep.
and were there to take the best care of me possible.
Yeah.
I got some of the worst advice, from those practices that I knew was bad advice because I'm in healthcare,
What
you
was
know?
some of the stuff that they told you?
Um, well, I also use functional, integrative lifestyle medicine.
Yep.
So I pay attention to what I put in my body, what I eat, the self care products that I use because they're endocrine disruptors. Many of
Mhm.
them are. And one of the first things I had was, of course, nausea. It's
Mhm.
pretty heavy. Got worse with every one.
Mm.
um, Ooh, that was slightly the flashback for
I
me.
was like, "Where did you go? You went somewhere not good."
That was not good. I remembered how much weight I lost by the 3rd one and how I had to
Oh,
handle that.
goodness,
Thank
goodness.
goodness for integrative medicine, and a little bit of, conventional, medicine too, but, anyway, getting back to that question that you had. Oh, the first bad advice I had was when I had bad nausea. I said, "I can't even take prenatal vitamins. I can't
Yeah.
stomach anything." And they're like, "Oh, just, go to the grocery store and take some Flintstones." And so I go to the grocery store and I
Seriously?
look. Mhm. And I turn the bottle over and there are blatant endocrine disruptors. Propylene glycol is a big one. That's a
Mhm.
petroleum-based product. An oil-based product, like motor oil type-based product, is going in as a preservative. It's in everything unless you really read labels, you miss it. But I put those
All of us
back.
as kids are well preserved because we took Flintstones as kids, but let's
I
not do
know,
it to our
I know,
unborn child.
I did. I know, I did too. But and I think I might have even bought them without looking. I was so desperate, and then
Oh,
got them
sure,
home,
yeah.
and then took them,
Yeah.
and then was still just absolutely nauseated. And then I read it, and I was like,
Oh,
"Oh,
we're not gonna do that. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
I'm
no
not going
good.
to do that." So
Yeah.
I ended up finding a plant-based alternative. It was fine. It was just that. That's just a small example
Yep.
of the way that we are all trained. I mean, none of us get this background. So,
Yep.
I'm not going to give OBGYNs a hard time, or anyone else a hard time, because unless you seek out the
Right.
continuing ed,
We
none of
just
us
don't
get
know.
that. You just don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, that was the first big red flag. And, of course, that's something I encourage, moms to do too,
Yeah.
is get a leg up on that. EWG.org is a great resource for getting those estrogenic endocrine disruptors out of your house, out of your food.
Yeah, I feel like hormones, we could do a whole other episode on
Yes.
hormones.
Yes.
Staring down, menopause right now, I'm like, "Holy crap, here we go again."
Mhm.
I feel
Oh,
like we
yeah.
we we just got through all the pregnancy, postpartum, we're like, "Hey, we're in the clear." No, no, we're
Oh,
not.
definitely not.
Oh
No.
my goodness. All right, so for you, your background, like, you're really active in doing other things. You play the violin, you sing, you horseback ride, you do all these things. And one of the coolest things that you've done recently is make this, I think, just talk more about the voice and the pelvic floor. And I know you've done a lot with our mutual friend Susan Clinton, talking about the
Mhm.
glottis, kind of all of that too. Like, where did that kind of connection be like an aha moment for you? And what are some of the ways that you use voice to help clients with their pelvic floor?
Um, I remember the exact moment that I knew that it was an issue, that the voice and the pelvic floor were intimately connected,
Mhm.
via the respiratory diaphragm and other things. I was actually singing,
Ah.
and I was pregnant. I was really pregnant.
Oh.
Yeah, it was 3rd trimester, and pregnancies, as we all have felt, is just a natural state of inflammation. Everything feels like it's swelling
Pissed off. Yep.
everywhere. Everything's angry. You can't reach your feet at this point. You can't sleep. It's just hard. And our resting inflammation goes up under any of those conditions, not to mention the blood volume and all that stuff that increases. But the other thing that happens is your vocal folds are sensitive to that, and they get congested and
Yes.
swollen. And during that time, I was doing a lot of gigs, jazz gigs, church gigs, wedding gigs, weekend stuff, and all that kind of thing. And I was sitting in church because I was sitting on a stool because I'm out of
Yeah.
breath
You're
just doing
pregnant.
just existing. And right in the middle of the song, I lost my voice, not like laryngitis lose, but like when the kid kicks you in the diaphragm, or
Oh.
basically
Yes.
anywhere. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I had a swift issue with that. Like, he was getting bigger, and boy did he come out with a big head. He still has a giant head.
At least he's on brand.
Yeah, XXL
Oh
horseback riding
boy.
helmet. Um, and I messed the song up. I messed it up, and a musician came up to me afterwards, and they kind of winked, and they were like, "Breathing problem?" And I was thinking, a little bit more than just breathing
Yeah.
problem. I felt all 3 diaphragms that day. I felt the pelvic floor, I felt my respiratory diaphragm,
Uh-huh.
and my voice just stopped.
Wow.
Um, so that was my first indication.
You're like, something's here.
Yeah, and then as I had to go through and do my own rehab, I lived in a really isolated area, like I mentioned, and had no colleagues that could really, help. So I had to really get creative with treatment.
Mhm.
Um, also went back to singing, and then I just felt that intimate connection of, once in that immediate postpartum, where it feels like nothing is in the right place.
Yes.
Everything's just squishy everywhere.
Yeah.
Nothing has moved back. Um, I had no voice. I had no endurance. I couldn't get through a gig. I'd be hoarse the next day. It was
Mm.
just rough.
Mhm.
So that was my first indication. But now I see all kinds of fun and interesting things that people are excited to improve their voice,
Mhm.
but they also come in with a story that I'm like, "Oh, it makes me angsty because they've been suffering for
A
sometimes
long time.
decades,
Yep.
with leakage as a vocalist
Yes.
or as an actor."
Yep.
And they were taught to one of the problems is overbreathing. They were deliberately taught to overbreathe. Almost when I see it on imaging, it looks like bladder hypermobility, like the bladders just they breathe so forcefully out through the abdomen that things just get
Yes.
pushed
It's
and
like they
dropped.
almost need that too big of a breath.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
they have
Yep.
taken too big of a breath, and in those people, I find that there's, like, tons of anterior flare, so for everybody
Mhm.
listening, just, the rib cage wants to move out this way,
Mhm.
but not really out this way, like
Yep.
the bucket handle lift, right?
Yep.
Not much, lateral costal or, what we call that bucket handle lift of a breath where the rib cage is moving, so that's a lot of what I'll end up focusing on initially, because I use a lot of imaging.
Mhm.
So when they come in, I'll image the diaphragm, I'll image the pelvic floor, I'll see how happy the bladder is or isn't,
Mhm.
and what position it's in, and then ask them to start doing some vocalization.
Yes. Isn't that so
Yep.
much fun?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
one of my favorite things to do. I have a, professional singer that I've been working with and have been following through pregnancy, and I was like, "Let's just see how you use everything because it's gonna change and we're gonna need to find this on the other side." And it's just so cool to see what their pelvic floor does, what their obliques do, like,
Yeah.
when does TA kick in? Like, for you, what are the common like, what's, like, a good pattern and what's, like, a dysfunctional pattern that you see?
Um, One of the key ones, and I'm thinking of specific people.
Mhm.
One I had was, an older gentleman, and he came to me with incontinence, but it took maybe 30 seconds into the appointment before I realized that, "Ooh, this is a vocal issue."
Mm.
It's not, it's not coming from the bottom up, it's coming from the top
Oh,
down.
interesting, yeah.
And so, one of the big dysfunctional patterns for him was, what and I know is apposition, but for, everyone else, it's just the shape of the diaphragm
Yeah.
was really flat.
Huh.
It was really flat, and so there was when I imaged that, there was not this nice pretty dome.
Mhm.
If you Google the image, you'll see what the respiratory diaphragm, and I'm
Mhm.
kinda talking to everybody who's, not a PT out there. You'll see what it should look like, and his was flat, and he had a
Hmm.
lot of that front flare
Mhm.
out of the rib cage. And when I imaged the pelvic floor to look at the bladder and the base, when he would breathe, he would take an inhale
Mhm.
and it would move too much.
Mm.
Far too much. It could easily be mistaken for someone who's an excellent breather. And so that's the
Gotcha. Yep.
tricky part. Yeah.
Yep.
So you could totally look at that and say, "Wow, what a great
Great
breather." But it
excursion. Yeah. And it
great
was
excursion. But actually he would have involuntary leakage just trying to breathe.
because 'cause you've got no stability, you've got no support there if he's
There's
overdoing it.
nothing. Yeah, there's
Yes.
nothing there. So, that's an example of the dysfunctional
Yep.
pattern for him. I also see a lot of psoas speaking, what I call
Mm.
psoas speaking, like the wrong thing is talking. So,
That's like my life. No, the wrong thing is talking.
the wrong thing is talking. I get that, especially after having gone through hip arthroscopy. There was a lot of stuff that was
You and me go when
thing.
was
Yeah.
yours?
2014.
Okay, I was before
Mhm.
you. I was '07.
Ah,
So that
yeah.
was like the dark ages.
It
We
was
could
the
have a
dark
whole 'nother
ages.
episode on that.
It was totally dark ages. I waited 3 years just hoping surgical technique and outcomes would improve, but anyway, mine was a birth injury too. It was
You know what?
totally
That's
preventable.
what I did my capstone on for my transitional DPT was I had a client that I was working with that had, like, some SI issues, and then we realized and we have a great local, well-known hip surgeon here, Derek Ochiai, and he
Oh,
did my
yeah,
surgery, and, yeah, no,
yeah.
that's something that comes up, and I'm so glad that I caught on to that a long time ago. I'm not sorry about that. Well, I am sorry a little bit about the surgery,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
but you
yeah,
learn a lot from that kind of going
yep.
through that.
You do. It's not the way you wanna get all your clinical expertise,
No,
but
I
birthing a
wouldn't
bunch of
recommend it.
babies
Hmm.
and having it all kind of torn apart, during delivery,
Yeah.
and then it taking years to put it back together and then figure
Yes.
out these little finer points. That's part of the voice to pelvic floor for me.
Yep.
It's part of helping people who are really stuck in the hip scope stages and, people with voice
Yes.
problems to go, "Oh, let's work towards the functional, pattern."
Yep. Yep.
Which to get to the other side of your question on what does a nice functional pattern look
Yeah.
like, I want them to be able to not just vocalize, like I'll use yogic vocal toning,
Hmm.
in a very simple nutshell. Think of your vowel sounds like, A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes
Hmm.
Y.
Yep.
Yogic vocal toning can look very similar to that, and it's also has a very meditative, and support for anti-inflammatory component, vagal
Yep.
toning, and all that stuff, all that super super nerdy stuff. Um, so I could have them start with something as simple as that because what I've learned is that consonants are affecting people in different ways, which is a great research question to
Yes.
dig into is measuring some of those consonant sounds, some of those plosive sounds
Yep.
where the shape of the mouth is different.
Hmm.
That impacts the pelvic floor so differently.
Yep.
So if I start with some vowel sounds, usually if someone comes in and they have prolapse or incontinence, painful intercourse, whatever their issue is, they usually can't make a sound without that adverse pressure, that downward pressure,
Hmm.
happening through the pelvic floor.
Hmm.
So I'm working on retraining that. And it is lovely how imaging accelerates the process of
It's
recovery.
so helpful.
Yeah,
I don't know how people do it without. I'm like,
I
honestly,
know.
without that
I've never.
feedback, like you're just kind
Yeah.
of got a shot in the dark there.
You're
So,
guessing,
yeah.
you don't know, and unless you've got a hand internally all the time, which is really not practical or
Yep.
comfortable,
Yep.
you don't know what's happening. It's a
Right.
total shot in the dark, like you said. So, one of the things that I'll have people do is do some functional training, try
Hmm.
Pilates, try what do they do every day? If
Yep.
they're with an infant in those darn carriers that give you tendonitis in other areas. um, Carpal tunnel and epicondylitis and other issues and
Yeah.
rotator cuff stuff, which I end up like tag teaming treating those things when moms come in because
No one
baby
else is going to
equipment,
do it. Yep.
yeah, baby equipment is injurious. It really is. So I'll have them do that. And,
Hmm.
moms come in with their babies and stuff. So the equipment's right there. So I'll have
Right.
them do those tasks and then change the way they are breathing. And that breathing is first, vocalization comes second.
Yep.
And then I'll try different pitching, points for
Hmm.
them. And I wish that, and you know this totally. I wish that I could say, this cue helps for that problem.
Hmm.
But it never really, one
It's
cue,
never that clean.
it never
No.
is. So it's hard to, say that, this set of 4 cues works. So
Hmm.
I have kind of an arsenal of
Yep.
cues that I'll give them during
Me too.
biofeedback and say, and I condense them down and I'll say, we're going to go up with a bottom up set of cues
Yep.
or a top down set of cues or inside out or
Hmm.
outside in. Everybody understands the, kind of cardinal planes and directions.
Yep.
And so a lot of times the top down cues will work, especially if they're coming from a vocal background,
Yep.
but sometimes they surprise me and it's an inside out, cue.
Yes. It's funny what you get, and the other thing I tend to play with, let me know if you've done this before, I'll tap into stuff from when they were a kid because our motor patterns are very pliable at that point, like, did you play a wind instrument as a kid or did you sing as a kid? Maybe you're not singing now, but, like, what did you do then? Because sometimes they get all stuck up in their heads as an adult and try and
Mhm.
make things happen that, they try and
Mhm.
logic their way through it. But the
Yeah.
second we tap into something that they did when they were, like, 7, they're like, "Yeah, I got it."
Yes. Yeah. You know what I just thought of? Um, we don't swear on this podcast, right? Are we
You
swearing
can do
on this
whatever you
podcast?
want.
Okay, I can swear.
Yeah, you can swear.
Okay.
No, it's so funny. People ask me that. I was like, yeah, you can swear.
Okay, so immediately I thought when you said people get stuck in their head, I'm like, yes, we get our head up our ass all the
Totally.
time, and that
Yes.
is literally what's happening with this whole voice to floor pelvic, connection. I do it. I do it when I'm singing. I've done it so badly. I've like botched a performance and forgotten my lyrics, in the middle because
You're trying to get too much in your head.
and my
Yeah.
head is up my ass. I'm
Yep.
thinking too much and I'm
Yep.
not feeling it. And
Yep.
that cue is that little piece is so important that you really start to heal from trauma, birth trauma,
Yep.
emotional trauma. I don't think any mom gets out of the system without trauma induced,
Of course.
like a system induced trauma, like
Yeah.
systemic violence
Yep.
with women in healthcare. Um, but the moment we can start feeling those patterns of what we love, like the horseback riding thing or the violin,
Yes.
we start healing faster.
Yes. That was a great segue. Thank you very much. So maybe it's like a month ago. I can't remember. I love that my friends do like really cool stuff that I can't do or never could do. Or, I mean, you've been writing a while, right? Like, have you been writing since you were a kid or?
Definitely not.
No. How
I
old were you when you
wished
picked it up?
it was post-op hip scope.
No. See,
Yeah.
that's very surprising to me because within like, I think it was like 2 months after my scope, we had a trip planned to go to Aruba, and that's actually where we got engaged. And one of the things that we were going to do is horseback ride on the beach and la la la, so romantic. But 2 months post scope,
Ooh.
no,
Oh, no.
no, 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 no,
No.
no.
Too
So tell me
early.
more about that.
Okay. Okay. Well, here's the deal. So what happened with the original injury, super short story. I had never had any issues. I knew that I had femoral anteversion problems.
Mhm.
But when we went to PT school, which feels like the dark ages, back in the mid 90s, I was in
Mhm.
PT school. You measured for anteversion
Yep.
and then you didn't do
What do you
anything
do
with
with it? Right. Yeah, exactly. Like,
nothing.
there it
Like
is. Duh,
there was
nothing.
no
Yes.
technology. It was either
Yep.
you've got bursitis tendonitis or a hip replacement happening.
Right.
Like
You're like, there's
there
no
was
in between.
there was nothing in between. You did nothing with those, fancy version angles that you measured. So I knew I had a version angle issue back from PT school, but it didn't apply to me until well-meaning labor and delivery nurses cranked back on my
Mm.
legs.
Ouch.
And my first 2 births were beautiful. I managed to not do pain meds. It was very midwife led and directed by me. I got in a comfortable position. It was hands off. Well, by my 3rd kid, I think they were a little too excited because they don't see, no pain
Mm.
meds, during a birth,
Right.
and they were just trying to help. Well, it wrecked my hip.
Ah.
Yeah. And it was so much more painful. So to all moms out
Ouch.
there, that's just a directive, like hands off. Don't let anybody crank on your legs.
Yeah.
There's 1 or 2 articles out there, not much, because women's health is not
Right.
too important in research. That's a
Working
different
on it.
episode.
Right. We've got like 4 stacked now.
We do, we do, we do. So I just that is something I feel super strongly about, and I
Yeah.
coach all my moms when I do birth coaching. Hands off the legs. You dictate your position, not anyone else. And it made crowning so much harder
Mm.
because they were closing the pelvic outlet.
Which in the rear view, this is your 3rd. This should have been like, I've
Mhm.
been here, done that. I know how it
Mhm.
goes. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was more of a rush in and let me help you with that. Well, I was in transition and
Oh.
crowning and without meds and my pelvis is a little small. So, which is not helpful during childbirth.
Mhm.
You can't speak. You are in genuine pain.
Right.
You are in the other place,
Right.
you are focusing. I could not even I kept saying, "It hurts more, it hurts more," and I could never get out, "Please stop."
Ah.
Take your hands off my legs. This is
Right.
making it worse because by then the damage was already done.
Yeah.
So it does happen quick. So just if you put it in your birth plan, it would be a good idea. That way they know hands off, and you can save yourself
Yeah.
years and thousands of dollars in copays and deductibles and, and all that. So that's the short story. And so what happened after that was I needed a way to ease back into activity
Mhm.
because I knew with my hip dysplasia, I running never it does not match my pelvis.
Mhm.
All it does is give me patellofemoral pain and
Yep.
all kinds of other things. So
Yeah.
my body's not built for that. Some women are built to run, and
Yep.
you go run, it's fantastic. And hip scope patients, you can totally return to running. You can do
Yep.
anything you want, but I looked at it as respecting the fact that my structure of my hip was not going
Right.
to change.
Yep.
I had I didn't have enough coverage. I had hip dysplasia. I just couldn't go back to running anymore.
Yep.
So I did my therapy and I let that go.
Yeah.
I let it go and picked up horseback riding. And it was because of the hip scope that I picked up horseback riding.
Mm. Well, and I think that's one like it's like a half a lecture in PT school where you learn about hippotherapy and how
Mhm.
the horse movement mimics our own pelvic movement. I actually did have a clinical um gosh, we were at Roosevelt Warm Springs in Georgia and they had everything there. It was subacute rehab. And you could go do part of your clinical at this horse farm, which was the coolest thing ever.
Oh my god.
We didn't get to ride the horse, but they had that. And then obviously because it was Warm Springs, they had like the magical waters that FDR was in with polio. So we had all the modalities, but I mean, it's not common that people think, oh, hey, I had hip surgery. Let me go hop on a horse. Like
Yeah.
that definitely wasn't my gut
Yeah.
reaction.
Yeah.
When did you start to notice that you're like, okay, hips are better? And then what did you feel from a pelvic floor perspective?
The pelvic floor was the critical piece, and it's why, as having a background as an athletic trainer and being in sports medicine for a long time, I'm pretty adamant that if someone's having a hip arthroscopy done, they must have pelvic PT
Yes. Yeah.
and a really darn good ortho PT,
Yes.
if not the same person, then 2
Yes.
people.
Yeah.
Because that was the piece that wanted to hang on the longest.
Yes.
It's sensitive. It's kind of the gain on your pelvic floor is high. When something
Yes.
isn't quite right orthopedically, the pelvic floor is like, "I can handle this," you know?
Yes.
And so whether it is the obturator or whatever it is that wants
Yep.
to dig in, it digs in. And so that was the last piece that let go, even though I was treating it the whole time. It's
Right.
just for me, it was the last piece that let go. And so then I started after protocol. We could have a whole discussion on protocol. But after protocol was finished, not because the only reason was precautions. Like after
Mhm.
I respectfully and definitely followed all those precautions
Mhm.
and what the surgeon's recommendations were. So all of you listening, do that. It's important.
Right. Check the box.
Follow those precautions. Once that was done, I was free. I wasn't fully rehabbed. I
No.
went to PT for 18 months
Yep.
because I was 3 years postpartum and had never been able to recover from postpartum after the 3rd.
Mm.
So I had all the postpartum deficits that, in a very wide diastasis that you do your best with, but when your hip has fallen apart, there's only so much you can do, you
Right.
know?
Right.
So I had the kind of the double whammy of 2 different injuries going on, my 3rd childbirth and then the hip scope, but I picked up the horseback riding because it fits my pelvis.
It fits that angle, it
It
fits your
it fits the
biology.
hip dysplasia. Yeah,
Ah, yeah,
yeah.
and then how where along the line did you realize you had the dysplasia? Did you know it in PT school, or was it later?
I did, but it was kinda useless information
Right,
since
again, you're like, "Great, now what?"
yeah,
It doesn't mean
yeah,
anything.
like,
I
now
think
what?
a
Yeah,
lovely example what year did you graduate? I think we might have been around the same time.
98.
Okay, I was 99. So, yeah, like, I when I look back on my PT school experience, I'm like, I learned not to kill anybody, and I learned about a lot of things, but I didn't learn what to do with it, and which is not helpful, and we were
Yeah.
in such silos back
Mhm.
then, and again, I don't think I would have ever gotten to where I'm at now had I not done the orthopedics first. And it sounds like
Yeah.
you were in the sports ortho realm. And I think that's why, we connect so much, is like, you have to have this other view, because all we knew about pelvic floor 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago, was this tiny little, you stick your finger in and you poke around, and you can only have like weakness if you had a baby. And if you can't have sex, then stick your finger in there, touch the tender spot for 90 seconds and then move on. Like that was so like anticlimactic. I'm like, this sucks. I don't want to do this. And
Yeah,
nobody's
yeah.
getting better.
Yes, yeah, and I
And
remember my first, class, it was all about EMG, and it was all about the
right. No,
big
that's
fat
all it was, right?
giant monitor computer screen and then
Yes.
hooking them up and, yeah.
Yeah, no, and it's funny, as you're sharing your hip story, mine was reverse because I had my hip surgery prior to kids. So my surgery was in '07.
Um,
My youngest was born in '11. I think I had, in retrospect, overactivity. He did not drop. And I think I had some
mm,
issues because I don't think that pelvic floor aspect was fully resolved, because at that point in time, and that's the thing I keep coming back to, that when I have moms that have kids like anywhere between like 7 and 10 years old, and they're like, well, I didn't know. And I'm like, no one did. We did not know this. Like ortho and pelvic were separate. And then we decided to do a mashup. And that's only because we decided to take down the wall in between that we know any of this stuff. And I
mhm,
do think it's because a lot of us that are in this space decided not to accept the division, and knew professionally that it had to mash up, because what we were going through as like a person, as a patient, it wasn't working. And that
right,
we weren't willing to walk away. We're like, well, there's got to be a solution there somewhere. So
mhm,
it's on the backs of the crap that we all went through.
that
So
we've
so those of you
arrived.
that are new at this and you're like complaining that things aren't any further, sorry, we were working on our own shit the best that we could.
We definitely were, and having some moments. I tell you that the feeling that you get when you're on the other side of that though, I knew that I was better,
Yeah.
all the way better, when I popped up on a surfboard for the first time at the 18-month
Oh,
mark. Yeah,
okay.
in Costa Rica.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm surfing and I'm like, I just wanted to
Okay.
cry, but also I was like, "I'm in Costa Rica on a wave," like, "You gotta stay up."
Yeah. Well, and for me too, it's been interesting to kind of like discover, oh, hey, there are some pelvic floor issues. Um, but I think because there was such a gap in how to rehab well. Like I remember I went and found another therapist that if I did 40 minutes of prep before a run, then I could run pain free. And this was before I had kids. And I wasn't willing to do that before I
Mm,
had kids. Sure as hell wasn't going to do that after. The big game changer for me came a lot with the initiation of a lot more research on load, and just kind of loading tissues and that kind of stuff too, which I still think we have a lot more to understand with respect to how to load the pelvic floor appropriately, and
yeah.
when and why, and all that kind of stuff. But um, no, I had no thoughts at that point that I would ever run distance again, because I just couldn't do it. And then I did my first half marathon this year pain free, and I'm like,
Yay!
okay. And of course my brain's like, could you do a full marathon? I'm like, don't push it, girl. You've got a little cartilage defect. Let's not push it.
Yeah, yeah. On my sabbatical, I got to ride I ride English usually.
Mhm.
I got to ride Western twice, which
Cool.
was magical. It was
Oh my
absolutely
gosh.
magical, and
Is
I'm
your like
actually going
hair
tonight.
flowing?
If I had it, you know? But I had my cowgirl hat
Like it?
on. It was holding it all down anyway.
Love it.
But, and I'm going tonight. I'm getting back in the English saddle
Oh, good for
tonight
you.
after having 5 weeks
Yeah.
out, and did my first show, a couple of
Good for
months ago
you. That's awesome.
with jumping, which I actually swore I'd never do,
Mhm.
and then I jumped for the first time and realized I felt like that's as close as I'd ever get to feeling like the horse itself, or any
Mhm.
animal that can fly,
Fly.
or really, yeah,
Yes. I
yeah. I
love
was like,
that.
"I get it now. I know why." people get addicted to their, their horses and the horseback
Right.
riding. It's
Right.
very freeing. Yeah.
So let's say you have a client that comes to you with, hey, I'm having leakage or pressure with singing, or when I'm jumping with my horse, I've got, these problems. Like, what's kind of the process that you walk them through and be like, hey, this is what we're gonna look at. This is what we think may be happening. This is how this, like, how do you kind of walk them through what that journey is gonna look like?
Yeah. First of all, I let them know that they didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
It's not their fault. Um, it's why I feel pretty strongly about volunteering to try and create policy, so we can have postpartum standards of care, which we don't currently have. So that's the first thing I tell them is, hey, it's not your fault. We don't have standards of care. Other
Yep.
countries have things in place. We have absolutely nothing. And we don't really support women and families the way we should from a policy perspective. So after, letting them know that, I first of all, if they are women, I will take them through just a full kind of I think of car maintenance,
Yeah.
a full kind of check for postpartum and make sure that there's nothing driving it that is related to, unattended postpartum issues, which again is not their fault. And
Right.
usually there are several postpartum drivers because most moms didn't get any care. And now I'm seeing them early, like you had also
Yep.
mentioned, within 30 days is the recommendation now. And so that's what I press in, even when the OBGYN is like, well, I don't want you to see the PT before 6 weeks. No, the
Mm.
recommendations are 30 days. And
Yep.
so I want them in at 30 days. Keeping good relationships with them. I'm
Of
not
course.
not doing
Of
anything
course.
that's going to step on their toes at all, making them happy, and staying in my lane, of course. But I will take them through all of that. And there's usually a lot to address there with typical postpartum stuff. But then after that, I also want to be, as non-invasive as possible in the
Yep.
first visit. They've been poked, they've been prodded,
Yep.
they've probably been medically gaslit, that just a lot of bad shit has happened to them. And I just want to acknowledge it, but also not get all pokey and proddy
Yep.
myself. The easiest way to do that is to use imaging.
Oh, it's the best, isn't it? I
Yeah.
love that at a couple weeks after, because I just think
Yeah.
finding that connection,
Mhm.
and to your point too, if we're not gonna look internally, you can get some really great information on where to start, where to get connected. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will start there and do what I call my little 3 diaphragm check.
Mhm.
I'll look at the voice, I'll look at the respiratory diaphragm, I will look at the pelvic floor, all through imaging,
Yep.
which it pleases, moms because they don't have to be poked or prodded the first
Oh, they love
day,
it.
and they walk away with really super valuable information
Yes.
that they don't need to be dependent on me to continue.
Yes, thank you for saying that, because that's, I think, another thing that is very prevalent in therapists our vintage, if I can say that,
Mhm. They create
is
dependency. Yeah.
yes,
Mhm.
which I my ego doesn't need to be stroked.
No,
It's not
yeah.
about me.
It
It's
is
not
not.
about me, you don't need these.
It's not
But
about.
that's very
Yeah.
much what we
Mhm.
were brought into, that if we
Mhm.
didn't do this, we were nothing, and the fact of the matter is this is far more important. So,
It is, that empowerment piece, they walk away with lots of information on their
mhm,
first day. I'm also a documenter, so as I am explaining, I am writing
mhm,
very specific things for them to do, whether
yep,
it's handouts that I have created, already for the situation, but the handouts never really quite nail it,
yep.
even though I've probably got 30 or 40 unique to the clinic. They
Yes,
still need that
I
that
understand.
personalization piece.
Yep,
So I get in there
absolutely.
and give them really specific pieces to do, but, it's all related, to that imaging, and I also ask them about their confidence level, on a on a scale of 0 to 10, instead of the pain being the focus, it's
Yeah,
confidence,
that's a great question.
and I want a 7 out of 10.
Mhm,
If I don't get a 7 out of 10, meaning I feel really confident that what we just went through, I can execute at home, and
mhm,
I'll see you in a month or I'll see
yep,
you in 2 weeks. If I don't get a 7 out of 10, I missed something. I
yes.
didn't do my job well.
And I love that you say that too, because there's nothing moms don't need more guilt. And if you give
Yeah.
them the gigantic list of things and it's their fault because they didn't get to it, no, that's not it. It's we didn't do our job. So thank you for
Yeah.
saying that.
Yeah. It's that is on me. So I always
Yes.
want to make sure I'm clear and build confidence, build
Hmm.
self-efficacy, let them know they can,
Yep.
let them know it's not their fault. And then it's very specific from there. It could be
Hmm.
a rib cage mobilization. It could be a laryngeal mobilization or a vocal diaphragm mobilization. It could be external pelvic floor release. I mean,
Hmm.
it could be a host of things. I do try and give them something from each diaphragm
Yep. Makes
because
sense.
from not just a not just neurological and musculoskeletal, but also from the psycho-emotional and
Yeah.
spiritual side. That's where I heavily lean into therapeutic yoga,
Yep.
mindfulness, meditation, setting intentions, being very
Yep.
deliberate, because that also has an anti-inflammatory impact. And I think that piece, the mental health piece, means more than the physical stuff that I'm giving them.
That I really like that you bring that up as well, because I feel like the intentionality and the mindfulness, like if the worst thing that comes out of it is you become a mindful parent and you learn that early, um, and being really targeted and intentional and understanding why you're doing something, it's far more efficient. And
Mhm.
then if you know what you're getting from it and you feel that, then it's going to encourage you to kind of do whatever that is more and build that habit. So I play a lot with that. I started, it was probably before my hip surgery, I started studying a lot of mindfulness stuff. And it's funny how as a parent, I didn't learn that in PT school. I learned that from
Yeah.
parenting.
Yeah. I
That's
really
awesome.
trust pelvic PTs who are also parents. There's all
Yes.
kinds of great people out there, but I think Glennon Doyle said this once. She said, "Who am I going to listen to? Someone that talks about it that's never experienced,
Yeah.
or someone who's actually been down in the ditches, with the
Yeah.
blood, sweat, tears, and all of it. I'm gonna listen to that person. I'm gonna listen to the person
Yeah.
that's really been through it." And I have tons of empathy for my patients having gone through a bunch of this stuff,
Yep.
all the stuff for childbirth
Yeah.
times 3, and, a lot of the pelvic stuff that obviously goes along with it. And, coming out of that, I had to learn to sing again every
Yes.
time. I had to learn to breathe again. I
Yep.
had to really, patch it back together in a way that, it's actually put me in
Better
better
place.
condition
Yep.
than before kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
No,
I hope that's a word of maybe encouragement to moms, like,
yeah.
it could actually be better,
I
after.
2 things that come to mind with that. I think that's a lovely lesson to get to when you have those moms that really weren't educated, that the expectation they were given is that they were gonna be exactly the same, and there's this less than feeling on the other
Mm,
side, and I'm like, you couldn't pay me to go back to my 20-something self for so many reasons.
heck no.
I can lift heavier, I can do more things, I have more
Mhm.
capacity for stuff just physically. So understanding that there is a better than, and to kind of lean into that a little bit.
I love that.
Um, that I think it just but I think you have to trust that that's coming and have somebody not set you up that you like, of course, you're not gonna be the same when you're 50 as you were when you're 20, and I don't
Ooh,
want
I
that.
hear a lot of those messages coming in from other practitioners where, that's why they didn't get referred because what makes you think you're gonna be the same? You had a baby. That's the way it is, which is the biggest bunch of
Right.
bullshit
Exactly.
ever. It's a crime, to tell
Yes.
any woman or person who's given birth that, because it's just simply a flat out lie. You
Yeah.
can be even better in so many ways, and you're gonna
Yes.
be wiser with your body. You're gonna know it
So
better.
much better. There's some great
Mhm.
examples in professional sport right now. One I'm thinking of is, Steph Bruce. She runs for NAS Elite Hoka, and she's had 2 kids, and I think, gosh, her youngest might be, like, somewhere between 5 and 7, and she's pregnant again and running really fast. But she's been very open about, like, she's the one that, like, years ago kinda blew up media because she has a pretty significant diastasis.
Mhm.
But she works with a PT, and she's an amazing runner and all that kinda stuff, and now she's, out there pregnant, but she's like, "Please understand, like, I know my body really well as an athlete, and I've also done this twice before. And there's such wisdom that comes with experience, intentionality, and it's been so really cool to see her confidence in that. And
Yeah.
I think having a lot of pro athletes that are coming back and performing better, like a lot of the ultra marathoners, holy cow, they're killing it out there after kids. So I think we're getting more visible examples that yes, we can be better and we're stronger in our 30s and 40s and 50s and that sort of thing. The other thing that I was thinking of when you were speaking earlier about going through these things ourselves, it's a fine line. It's a fine line between empathy and understanding and not
Mm.
projecting your experience onto someone else.
Mm.
And I
Mhm.
see that sometimes too. And it really takes a lot of self awareness on our part that and I still feel it sometimes too. I feel it when people, say certain things, and I just kinda catch myself a little bit, and, like, somebody will come in, and it's usually a first-time mom, and they're like, "Oh, I had a natural delivery," and I still kinda catch myself because I had 2 C-sections, and I'm like, "You're not less than," you know? It's like but it's
Yep.
funny still, like, 10 years later, those things still sort of catch you, like but if it weren't for
Mhm.
all of those things, I wouldn't think the way that I do now. I wouldn't be as open to other things as I am now, and again, it's that experience again, like, you can choose to just throw it down, or you can choose to let it challenge you and grow and that kind of stuff, which I think for me in the rear view as a pelvic therapist, like having gone through all of that, I'm far better for it.
Mhm.
No one should have to go through those things
Yeah.
to learn all
Yeah.
this, as
But
you would
that's
agree.
yeah, exactly. That's the catalyst for change.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the field of pelvic health in rehab and therapy is as important, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
use an example and draw a parallel, as women earning the right to vote. If you
Yeah.
think about what they had to go through in order to earn that vote, right?
Yes.
And what we had to go through not having the care, not having the help, not having the science,
Right.
to get to this point, I think it's very cathartic. It's very seismic, if I can use that word,
Hmm.
that now we're in a position where, yes, we got a long way to go.
Yeah.
We've got to get a bill pushed through Congress, which we're still trying to do right now.
Yes.
Academy of Pelvic Health, and hopefully that will get some traction
Yeah.
because it will change the face of what we see every day
Hmm.
because it will be mandated that we have standards of care for pelvic health, postpartum specifically, that everyone is screened and that everyone is referred. So I think that that's important. It's in terms of the profound meaning of what it means to basically have pelvic health available now,
Yeah.
and you don't have to suffer through that stuff anymore.
Yep.
There's still pockets of the country everywhere. I think I'm in
Hmm.
one of them, even though I'm in the third largest city in North Carolina. We still have people who aren't practicing, in an evidence-based way.
Hmm.
But that's why we do things like this, to get
Yep.
the word out and educate moms, and then they become the informed, empowered consumer. They know what questions to
Yes.
ask. So
Yes.
that's very cool.
That's a big
Um,
change that I feel like has evolved probably more concentrated the last few years because so many people have turned to social media for information. And again, there's pendulum effect, and I see more crap out there than I care to mention. But if there's anything that can come of it, it's just teaching people to ask questions. It's teaching people to use their logic and their common sense, and don't leave until you get those questions answered, and vet your resources. Um, and because there's more information out there than ever, and you need to understand that where you're getting your information is going to be somebody who did a little bit more than take like a Saturday afternoon course,
mhm. Yeah.
so it really is. I've definitely done a lot more advocacy and just kind of helping people understand how to vet information and understand that just because somebody says something doesn't make it necessarily true, but also understanding that we're doing the best we can with evidence informed, because there's a hell of a lot of things that we can't wait around till the paper is
Mhm.
written. So we're going to but it's what we do is informed by what we know from the
Mhm.
evidence. So,
Right. It is, and that N of one in the way,
yeah.
one person presents when you're doing imaging, because we have the technology to see it. We don't need
Right.
to guess. You can see if it's
Yes.
working or not in
Yep.
real time, and that is a
Yeah.
huge difference. And if I could leave, moms with, and, fellow therapists with, some encouragement,
Yeah.
I love how the science between contemplative medicine and biomedical, whatever you want to call it, endocrinology, musculoskeletal, neuromuscular science kind of converge,
Yep.
because when you look at someone, and I'm trauma informed, provide trauma informed care, so which is, I think, really important in pelvic health. So when a mom comes in and she has experienced that, it's lovely to see that the evidence supports that improving proprioception. And as a mom,
Yes.
you're already going to have better proprioception than the average person walking down the sidewalk.
Mhm.
So you are a superhero in that way, just so you know. Proprioception is that knowledge of where you are in space. You're better at it just because you're a mom,
Yeah.
just because you pick up your kid 1,000 times. No matter, it doesn't matter how you gave birth, or if you adopted. It doesn't matter. As a mom, you're going to have that better proprioception.
Yeah.
That improves your recovery time when you come and
Mhm.
see us in pelvic health. But it also really accelerates the pace of your recovery
Mhm.
from trauma.
Yeah.
So just having that, and that's the crossover between what we think about as, well, that's mental health territory. Actually, no, it's pelvic health
Yeah.
territory.
Yep.
It is both, because we're influencing vagal tone. We are
Yeah.
improving. We're improving the body's ability to manage, inflammation and to
Yeah.
process stress in a way that doesn't stress out your endocrine system. For
I
example.
I love that there's I mean, I don't love the reason why, but I do love that there's more conversations about the vagus nerve and that kind of stuff. It's been more in the context, I think, of COVID and so on. But like the fact that people are uttering the word and they know what it means,
Yeah,
like it just I think the more we can kind of demystify our systems and understand that we're complex, but we're not impossible, it just makes things
yeah.
so much more accessible for sure.
It does.
Definitely.
The take home is that the intervention that you do in your talk therapy and mental health, that's probably going to work for pelvic health too.
We could all use some
So
therapy. All
that's
right.
cost effective, guys.
Yes, definitely. See, now we'll talk to the insurance companies.
That's right.
All
And
right.
and and in our economy and with inflation, hey,
Oh god,
cost
don't
effective is good.
another episode. All right, so at the end of each episode, speaking of which, I have a couple questions that I ask everybody, and you have 17 years to pull upon, so favorite activity since becoming a mom?
Oh my gosh. Um, Music is my medicine
Mm,
whenever things are heavy, and as a
yep.
mom, shit gets heavy a lot. I turn to music. Um, I'm a beginner violinist, so it may not be fit for other people to consume. But then I spent, 20 years or so singing jazz, professionally, so I
That's your
just turn
sweet
to
space.
music.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I
And the
love
kids,
I was gonna say,
it's
I
good for
love that
kids.
you shared that with them. That was very much a part of my childhood. We had a family band. That's another episode.
Oh,
I will share that privately later.
I love
Yes,
it.
there are pictures. No, I'm not sharing them. No, that's very much always been a part of my family too, and so there's something cathartic about it. So it's really cool that that's something that you have for yourself, but also an aspect of that you can share with your kids. Awesome. All right, one piece of advice for new moms.
Don't let anybody make you feel guilty,
Yes.
because it's preloaded.
Yes.
Like, epigenetically, it's preloaded. We're socially conditioned to feel guilty
Yep.
about not people pleasing,
Yes.
basically. I'll be 50 this year, and
Happy birthday.
thank you, in like a couple of weeks.
I've got a couple more years. I'm catching up on you though.
Woo! Yes, they're awesome. I'm totally enjoying this whole transition.
Nice.
I'll be 50 this year, and I can say honestly, it has taken until this year to I feel like fully embody not giving a damn what anybody else thinks.
I have less F's to give, and
Yeah.
I thoroughly have appreciated that freedom.
Yeah, that's where the sabbatical came from for me is
Nice.
I'm not gonna feel guilty about it. I've never taken a month off unless I was, like, mortally injured, like
Or you had a
childbirth,
baby. Right, exactly.
surgery, emergency
Good for
surgery.
you.
Yeah. Unless I was flat on my back, taking care of a new human being,
Right, right,
total vacation, right?
right.
And so I had, no Fs to give and said, "I'm taking a break," and it was really freeing and really fantastic. And so moms out there, I know it's easier said than done, but get a leg up. Don't wait till you're 50. Don't let anybody make you feel
I will
guilty.
second that. I will second that a million times over. We're gonna guilt
Yeah.
ourselves enough. Don't let anybody make you feel that
Mhm.
way. Like
Don't
it.
pack the guilt bags. Just leave them.
Love it.
Leave
Leave
them.
it at
Yeah.
home. All
Just
right.
leave it at home.
Who's somebody in kind of pregnancy, postpartum, even like voice and horseback, right? Any of that stuff. Like who's somebody that we should know about more?
Oh, like someone in specific or like
Yeah.
topics?
No, somebody specific. Like who are your people where you're like, ah, I could just sit and suck your brain dry forever.
Oh my goodness. Well, a lot of them are in our generation because they had to live
Mm-hmm.
through the crap
Yep.
and come out on the other side. So I love to swap stories with Kathy Wallace. And
Yes.
I love to that's how I first started talking to Susan Clinton
Yep.
about the voice, and then we ended up
Yes.
presenting at
Yep.
CSM and World
Yep.
Congress. And then, I love my colleagues across the pond as well because they're doing fantastic things in that space, like
Mm-hmm.
Mummy Mott and Maria Elliott
Yep.
over in UK and what she's doing. And we all touch base or go out to dinner and pick each other's brains when we're doing World Congress or something like that.
Yep.
Although it's been a while because of COVID.
Tokyo,
Um,
my friend, put it on your calendar.
oh my
Tokyo, because
gosh,
did you do Geneva?
I did.
Okay, so we were
Hmm.
both in Geneva and we were both in Cape Town because I remember you
Yeah.
sitting at breakfast with your youngest, which he had the cute little hat and he was just adorable.
Yes. Yep.
I
Yep.
remember that. So Tokyo, 2 years from now, it's a date.
Okay,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right, fair enough. Okay, so all those people I love dearly. Kathy was my very first pelvic floor instructor, and then Susan has become a dear friend and just a smart woman. Love her
Yeah.
dearly. So yeah,
And I'm
good
gonna
people.
apologize 'cause I'm forgetting, like, I'm
I
gonna hang
understand.
up from this and then
And you're
have
gonna think
6
of 10
people.
more. It's all good.
Yes.
They all come up eventually.
Yes.
All right. And then last one. What does it mean to you now 17 years into this to be an active mom in postpartum?
I had an effed up idea of what fitness was before I had
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah.
I I exercised too much for too long. I made myself log those miles. I was gonna do it, like, damn it. It was always get off your lazy ass and do it, do it, do it.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, you just can't.
Yep.
And then I I got my shit together. I recalibrated. And here's the honest truth. I was in better shape after I recovered from postpartum. I no longer
Mhm.
was plagued with injuries and little inflammatory flares. I didn't have the immune issues that I did before. It just simply resolved because I had a different idea of what fitness was. And
Yeah.
turned out, that idea was it was that I didn't need to exercise all at one time, which the science supports now. But
Yes.
over 13 years ago, that didn't
That
exist.
wasn't a thing.
And we
Nope.
were being told to get out there and exercise for the half hour, whatever. And I was
Mhm.
like, F that.
Yeah. No, you can say
I,
it
I
because
F
I feel
that.
the same way. I'm like,
I didn't have
I have
time.
to rest, and
Yeah.
if I don't rest,
I was like,
I
I
am
can't.
worse off for it. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
I
I love
couldn't
that
follow
word
the science.
recalibrated. I love
Yeah.
that word recalibrated because I think it's recalibrated physically. I think
Yeah.
it's recalibrated emotionally, mentally,
Emotionally.
all of those things. And
Yeah.
I think that's part of the journey is we come in with something, then we have an event,
Hmm.
and quite often for women, it's that postpartum period. You can allow that to change you in a good way, or you can fight it and bang your head against the wall. And as you
Yeah.
well know, whatever you resist persists.
It does. Trust that gut. I was
Yes.
flying in the face of science when I started to do little 10-minute spurts of exercise, but then it worked. Yeah, I
right?
ended up in better shape,
Yeah.
than I've ever been, and I can still say now I feel fantastic
Yeah.
at nearly 50, and,
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the next, the
That's
next
awesome.
50.
50 more, girl. Do it. Do it.
Yeah.
Awesome. If you want to hear more from Dr. Ginger, you can find her on Instagram at Dr. Ginger Garner. She's got all her links there to her YouTube videos. She's kind of the go-to for yoga, and she does a lot with kind of functional movement and that kind of stuff, integrated health. She's your girl. So thank you so much. It was so good to catch up. We definitely need to not make this so infrequent. But keep us posted on your journey of more sabbaticals and RV life and more horseback riding videos and more singing videos for sure.
I'm committed to it.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.